In the last episode, yes, it was just 9 minutes, but I'm calling it an episode, we went from unreliable memory to a few squiggles on the page.
Chants that up to the 10th century were passing through generations of monks by the power of memory alone were getting the beginnings of a solid road map. By the way, scholars believe that learning their whole song book by heart would have probably taken them about 10 years.
All this very likely because of an explosion in the number of new songs constantly added to the repertoire. Holding all these tunes in your notes is no longer an option. So a few clever minds started working on a way to scribble over the lyrics, Music Memory 8. By the end of this episode, I'll leave you with note shapes that will start to look very familiar. Some will even have names you'll recognize, but more important even, notes that form rhythmic patterns that can be read without ambiguity by anyone who's been taught the rules.
We've had copyists, bookmakers, scribes, singers, and by the end of this episode, we'll be able to add one more career to the unemployed board at the job center, the composer.
Notation seems to have gotten a big push forward when Charles, King of the Franks, not those. Yeah, the people who lived in those green bits. Charlie Boy, aka Charlemagne, tried to impose Roman prayers and chants across his realm. New DJ in the house, gonna bring his own record. We still refer to this as Gregorian chant on account of Pope Gregory. In truth, he only got his own music genre and the Gramophone Award named after him because it suited good old Charles the Great.
If you're gonna force a new set of ideas on your lot, it will help if you get the Pope mixed up on that. It'll bring the stamp of approval from the Almighty himself. Unfortunately, as a consequence of this bulldozing wave, varieties of chants sung in many parts of Europe were eventually suppressed and some eradicated altogether. Beneventan, Ambrosian, Mozarabic, and Galician. Some of these even had their own notation.
Just to give you an idea on how things will evolve, here's a quick look at notation around the 10th century as it morphs into the future square notation and the melodic direction it represented. Individual notes after these initial squiggly lines started off as square, not the round shapes we know today.
Very likely as a consequence of a change in writing habits, which now favor the quill or nib with a broader end, which means horizontal and vertical strokes are going to yield lines of different thicknesses. I'm sure all of this was intimately related to the style of writing text, which was also evolving.
Carolingian minuscule as a standardized calligraphy had been imposed by Charlemagne, and for good reason. His empire was so vast that his officials had trouble reading each other's documents sometimes, as they wrote in different styles.
Now, around this time, there was also an unusual demand in textbooks, partly because of a springing up of a new type of heavyweight institution, the university, but also because the cultural landscape was growing fast. Writing in the vernacular takes off, and fiction starts to be written again for the first time since the classical era. Indeed, impressive changes for a period we tend to label as the Dark Ages. As we've established already, vellum was expensive and took a long time to make. Each of these books once roamed the fields in 4 legs, eating grass from dawn to dusk.
Carolingian minuscule is lovely and round, very clear, yes, but not quite suitable for where we're going with this. Come and have a look.
Carolingian will eventually evolve into Gothic textualis, the Gothic font we know so well today. No NAF tattoo is complete without it. This was a gradual evolution, but Gothic took off big time as it had many practical advantages. It's a lot more compact and faster to get through, which means you can cram a lot more text per line and per page and do it quicker. Therefore, cheaper textbooks.
A few variations rose and fell along the way, my favorite one being Littera Bastarda. I believe the first one that got us to dot the I's. Littera Bastarda roughly translates as the bastard letters. Moving on. Let's just make a quick detour to revisit the melisma from the last episode. Look at the squiggles above these words, immolatus, particularly between the penultimate and last syllables.
Seems like there was a bet between two monks to see who could cram more sounds into a single syllable. Or maybe this bit was done after a particularly well-catered lunch at the Abbey. Anyway, this feature is called a melisma, and it's a series of notes sung to a single syllable. Coming from the word meli, which is Greek for honey.
Making the melody sweeter or sticky? I know what I think. Nevertheless, this is a feature that still shows up in many music genres today. Think Beyoncé, Christina Aguilera, think Whitney Houston and that fabulous melisma in the opening phrase of "And I Will Always Love You," transforming a 3-minute pop song into a 2-hour concept album. But before we move on, I'd like to stress that this notation we've been seeing so far is a lot more nuanced than it looks. Through the addition of extra flicks of the pen or sometimes the odd letter, they would have left a lot of information regarding the relative weight of notes.
Slow down here, sing this bit a bit louder, this pitch is going to be higher than you expect, and so on. I'm mentioning this because it's going to be relevant in a bit.
And so we arrive at the main man, the monk Guido di Arezzo. No one has ever been more important on this journey than him. He made it possible to sing a melodic shape you had never heard before just by looking at notation on a page.
We're going to talk about two absolute killers he introduced. The first was adding these 2 lines on the page. One in red, where he said was where the F was going to live, one in yellow, where the C should be, and in between these two, another line where, you guessed it, the A was going to sit. C, B, A, G, F. Looks simple, just 2 lines, plus the others.
But this was the grandmother of all music stuffs. Finally, the vertical axis, the pitch, is properly sorted. No ifs, no buts, no coconuts. Sadly, as far as we know, no progress whatsoever with the rhythm yet. Oh, a clever device that seems to show up around this time as well, give or take a few weeks, was the custus,
which means guardian in Latin, from where we get the word custody, and it shows the singer what the next note is going to be on the staff below. Very clever.
Not happy with smashing one music wall and propelling us into the future of notation, Guido also proposed the revolutionary idea of using the melody from an hymn to St. John the Baptist as a mnemonic to relate notes on what we now call a scale.
This melody, conveniently, as each of the first 6 phrases begin on a consecutively higher note. So, he proposed calling each note by the corresponding syllable. Ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la.
Yes, ut morphed into do, and we later added the T, but how impressive is that... Spit that out. How impressive is that this stuff hasn't changed for 1,000 years. You could now hear something for the first time, sing the Ut Quent Laxis tune, figure out which starting note corresponded to the one on your melody, and write it down. Show it to the gang, post it to a mate. Sky's the limit. It's not Shazam or MIDI, but what a massive leap forward. The old familiar neumes, which we saw represented a sort of height and direction, are no longer needed. But they will remain for the moment. Very likely adding a good amount of disorientation, a sort of too many cooks spoil the broth sort of thing. A new graphic designer is urgently needed. Individual notes are now simply A, B, C, D, no more, no less than we know today. Well, hold on, let's quickly go back to that absent B on the scale. Curiously, Guido was aware that not only it wasn't including the note below C, but there were actually 2 of them, which he called hard, durum, and soft, mollies.
The hard was represented by a sharper, squarish B, and the mollies a more rounded, softer. These later evolved into the natural and the flat.
When it comes to the progress we've made on pitch, we still need to mention that none of these notes has a fixed pitch yet. The singer or magister who gets first crack at the tune decides where that first note's going to land. A middle A can be 4/40 or anywhere between whale song and dog whistle. But Guido wasn't just scoring hit after hit. When he pushed through with his phenomenal innovations, he was aware there were a few problems. Certain nuances were going back on the shelf, like those spice flasks you push through the back of the cupboard. Once they're there, they're as good as gone. Beautiful things like the liquescent,
which tells you if you have to close down a vowel at the end of a syllable, or the quilisma. Still no one is 100% certain on how to interpret this beautiful neume.
Sad as this was, some instructions, clear pitch for one, had to take priority. All these beautiful ornamentations, nuances, inflections, they had to go if sight reading was ever going to take off. There's only so many bits of data your brain can take in real time. Does this mean that Guido squeezed the mojo out of it? Well, not long after, this type of singing was known as cantus planus. Plain chant. Plain as in simple, flat. But let's not be too hasty to judge. May I remind you that it was indeed this type of singing that took us all by surprise, not you millennials, took us all by surprise 25 years ago in the mid-90s. Who climbed up the charts by passing Nine Inch Nails' The Downward Spiral, Pink Floyd's The Division Bell, making it even into double platinum? An album of Gregorian chants, marketed as soothing and mystical, recorded by Spanish Benedictine monks. They even had their own music video on MTV. Go blame Dead Can Dance and Enigma. Oh my, look at the time. I know I had promised that we'd get to the part where we'd sort out the rhythm with new notation, but you'll have to be on the next episode. See you then.